Hello, welcome to Movers, Shakers, Designers, Makers. I'm Steve Carpenter, Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture at Penn State. Today, I'm talking with Frank Dittenhafer, who earned a Bachelor of Science in Architecture degree in 1978, right here at Penn State. In 1985, Frank co-founded the firm Murphy Dittenhafer Architects, which has grown from a staff of 20 people to 2 offices in York, Pennsylvania, and Baltimore, Maryland. Frank's no stranger to the College of Arts and Architecture. He's been a volunteer for a number of years, but what brings us together today in this conversation is Frank's selection by the Department of Architecture as a recipient of the 2020 College of Arts and Architecture Alumni Award. This recognition was, of course, slated for 2020, not 2021, but like many things, the event was postponed until later this year, and we will celebrate in the fall of 2021. Frank, listen, until we're able to see you in person, I'm so happy to have this opportunity to chat with you about your career and about your time at Penn State.
Thank you, Dean Carpenter. It's great to almost be here in person and have a chance to have some conversation with you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Zoom and all, here we go. Frank, listen, I mentioned in my intro that you were one of the co-founders of your firm in 1985, whereas I like to say back in the 1900s. So I'm sure that step wasn't all that long after you completed your Master of Architecture degree here. Actually, you did that at the University of Pennsylvania, right? Because you earned your undergraduate degree here. You did your master degree at University of Pennsylvania. I'm wondering, at what point, was it at Penn State or in grad school or some point thereafter, when did you know you wanted to start your own practice?
That was never really on my radar, believe it or not. It wasn't. I mean, what I was really focused on coming from Penn State and then through Penn was doing excellent architecture. I mean, that's what the years really focused on. I wanted to do great architecture and was recruited to a large firm in Baltimore, 300-person firm, which is where I met my future business partner, Michael Murphy. And then when he left and went to a 3-person firm, I followed shortly. And we were both, had a lot of common interests in just, excellent design and architecture. Then that firm merged with a 20-person firm. And then around that time, as a couple of years passed, I passed the architecture license exam. And so I was thinking what my next steps were, having gone from a large firm to a small firm to a medium firm, and being in a really great city, Baltimore. Michael Murphy, had just started his own solo practice, and he said, "Well, before you make any other moves or jumps, let's talk." And so we met for lunch one day, and he basically said, "Why don't we form a practice, the two of us, 50-50 partners?" It had never crossed my mind, honestly. Certainly, I knew of other architects who had their firms and small practices or started practices, but it wasn't really at the top of my list or on my radar. I was still, young designer, architect, licensed now, and I was really trying to focus my energies on how to do great design, great architecture. I mean, that was really what the foundation was in terms of my education and the early part of my career. And so unexpectedly in 1985, Murphy and Dittenhafer was formed, just the two of us. But it very incrementally grew to more than that. And Michael and I really had our own opportunities to try to do great work.
So two points of clarification here. One, I believe I mispronounced your last name. It's Dittenhafer, is that correct?
Dittenhafer, but you're certainly not the first person, to do that.
Okay, well, I apologize. My mom was born in Massachusetts and lived in Massachusetts and Nova Scotia, and so some vowels I pronounce like she does, like parking the car. So Dittenhafer makes sense. So Dittenhafer, I apologize. The second point of clarification though is at what point in that conversation, because I've been in several of these conversations where you say, hey, what if somebody says what if, and the other person says, yeah, let's do that. At what point in that conversation, was it in that conversation where you said, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, or did you have to think it through for a little bit?
There wasn't a lot of thinking. I had just gotten married, so I did ask my wife, and
There was thinking there, and I'm glad
there
that
was some thinking there, and we had been I think married just for a few months, and
Mhm.
we had bought a house, and so change jobs, start a firm, do it all at one time, and but there wasn't an over amount of analysis. I think it was Mike's a good person. Uh, why not? This is time in your career to maybe give it a shot, and so we did it without really a lot of hesitation. Mike had a couple clients, a couple projects, so it wasn't a shot in the dark. Well, let's see if we can get work. We had some work. We had at least I think 2 or 3 projects. One was at Johns Hopkins University. It was kind of interesting. I still tell people this. We had an addition to the faculty club at Johns Hopkins University, which is kind of a higher profile project. And then we were doing renovating 3 Army barracks at Fort Meade as a homeless shelter for Catholic Charities. And so you can guess which project I worked on. I worked on the homeless shelter and the Army barracks. But so we launched this, and it quickly grew just by I think our relationships, with some people we knew, and the word got out that we were good guys and good workers and community-minded people, and it ended up not being a big gamble.
And so you mentioned also your interest in, look, I wanted to be an architect who focused on good design. That also connected you both together, I imagine. That same philosophy. Is that fair?
It is. Mike had gone to Penn for a master's as well, not at the same time. So we did have some architectural design, philosophical similarities, and we both were influenced a lot by Louis Kahn, Robert Venturi. And when I was at Penn State, there was a pretty strong connection at that time, to both Yale and Penn. Some of the professors, Roy Volmer had worked for Lou Kahn. Lou and Sarah, was at Yale, and so there was this pretty strong design philosophy that kind of grew from my days at Penn State, carried through Penn, and I meet up with my former business partner in my first job, coming out of grad school.
Amazing. So I want to move to, we're talking because of your alumni association, alumni award recognition, but you were also inducted into the AIA College of Fellows, the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows in 2007 in recognition of your design accomplishments. So I want to read a quote from the jury at that time. It says, Dittenhafer, though highly imaginative, but rooted and contextually sensitive design, has significantly enriched the urban and architectural character of central Pennsylvania and the surrounding region. That's quite a statement about the impact that you've made across the Commonwealth, Frank. And this might be something like asking a parent to choose their favorite kid, but if you had to choose 1 or even 2 projects that were particularly gratifying or rewarding that you saw come to fruition, what would they be, and why did you find that those 1 or 2 stand out for you?
Yeah, I think that one that definitely stands out, because it was one of the earlier projects, would be the Susan Burns Health Education Center in York, Pennsylvania, which is my home town. I grew up actually in a really tiny town in York County. But that project started with a group of volunteers who were in the healthcare field, but saw a real need for health education to be taught differently to small children, middle school, high school children, other than the way those courses were were taught in the schools, which were, pretty tough, boring courses. And so they had this vision to have a facility, a regional facility in York for health education. And there really wasn't anything like that, back in the day. We visited sort of a version in Easton, Pennsylvania, but it was really a new vision. And the property they had their eyes on was a 1920s former Dodge auto dealer building, sort of this slot building, 20,000 square feet. And in the front of it was the showroom. It was really auto palace-like room with beautiful millwork, black and white checkerboard floors. But then beyond that, for about 200 feet was the auto service bays, concrete and steel and, a vehicular ramp and that type of environment. And we had to compete, but we were hired by this group, it was just forming, to do the design of something that no one really knew a lot about. But we came up and they gave us some, really, some leeway, in terms of what this could be. It wasn't to be like typical classrooms. In fact, the areas where they would bus students to the site, which is still very active and very successful today, the environments are called teaching theaters. They're not, classrooms. And so we inserted a very robust, interesting language, of rooms on angles and different levels and shapes. And we restored the front showroom area into this, beautiful place where offices and events could be. And so it was this transformational adaptive reuse project. And that was in a time when there wasn't a lot of adaptive reuse, and it was in a part of the community, the city. It was an urban project. It was a challenging area too. So there were a lot of aspects of this, and we didn't know it at the time. We were just young architects, but we really went for it, from a design perspective and preservation perspective, community engagement perspective. And I think that was a very important project early in our career. The other one I would mention, though, since I get two,
Do.
the other I would mention was our first project at the Penn State York campus. And I said it not because it was Penn State, and I've had a great relationship with the Penn State York campus, but we had to compete. We went after a new building there that Pennsylvania DGS was in charge of, but OPP, was involved in too. But we got selected. It was a performing arts center, the new campus library, classrooms, cafe. It was all in one building, And we had done some performing arts center work, but we got this commission, and on a very challenging site, sloped 3 stories. The budget, of course, wasn't quite adequate, but we took it on, and worked very closely with a lot of different people to develop this. Again, not an auditorium, but a true performing arts center, 1,000 seats, balcony, parterres. In conjunction with an atrium sort of and circulation connecting it to a library in the same building, and then other, again, supportive spaces. A very interesting project. It's now named the Pulo Family Performing Arts Center, the Lee Gladfelder Library. But that project, beyond what the building was and the architecture, that project completely rebranded and transformed that campus. From kind of some of the, at that time, typical Penn State branch campuses where there's kind of nondescript buildings from the 1970s, 60s. And it was, from that moment, it was really great to continue that relationship with the people there, with the community who also used the facility, and to just see how it transformed. It didn't just serve a functional need, but it was a completely different type of place on the Penn State York campus, in terms of the program and in terms of, it sort of was at the edge of campus. And over time, to just watch it and to continue a relationship that was very transformational in a very large sense that we didn't expect. So I think both of those projects in different ways are very meaningful to me in terms of them, actually coming to fruition, and what they translated into, beyond the buildings. I always tell people, it's, even though we refer to these projects as our projects, they're not our projects. They're other people's projects, and so the projects are about, others. They're not about us.
So let's talk about that a little bit, uh, because what I'm hearing you say is, it's not about you and the architects. It's about other people. So that group of other people to me is a community, right? Whether it's a community of scholars and learners on a campus. You talked about, came from a small town in York, or in York County. Your first projects that you mentioned with, so here's Johns Hopkins, and then there's this other project. The other project was in support of community folks in a community. What is it with community that really moves you, that draws you to work that supports and has such a strong and rich connection to the needs and uses of that community?
That's a great question. And I personally, and I think my firm, I've never really separated the two. I've never wanted to or saw that they should or could be separate. The communities that we work with, and I think that continues to this day. But we've always been involved, and I've always been very interested in working with communities that need and would really benefit from our architectural planning, assistance. And that could be certainly communities in urban areas, which we've done, a lot of social service related, transitional housing, type projects, but also for communities where it's, populations, children or adults with real challenging needs, physical needs, mental disabilities, or academic higher ed communities, certainly, or other nonprofit, communities that really would, if the project, maybe isn't a kind of high profile, it's bringing dignity, to the volunteers or staff or the situation within a certain community. And I've always valued that situation. It's always been integrated into our work and our culture, at my firm. And from the very beginning, again, starting with, Sarah's Hope, the shelter, but continuing, with lots of different types of organizations and situations. And I think it's almost part of the definition that I've sort of developed about excellent architecture, which is kind of what I'm interested in doing. It doesn't, again, there are always maybe certain qualities to that are common, in terms of it has to function, it has to be safe, it has to be durable. But I've developed a refined, little definition that we've had for many years, that excellent architecture, needs to be an inspiring place. It needs to be a place that enriches the human experience, and it needs to be a place that people want to spend time there, whatever it is. If it's a residential project, or it's it's a workplace, or it's a place of learning. That's sort of my philosophy, and the conversations that I've sort of had internally with people in my firm. That's what it's all about. I mean, those, and thinking about it, I mean, those all those descriptives start with place, or have place, within it. And I think that's, place involves, I think, community. They're sort of one and the same. And that's nothing against projects and work that architects do that is repetitive for franchises, or it's some firms focus on a certain specialty, and they work all across the country or the world. And I've developed a little different take on architecture, and we could have grown, or could still, if we wanted to, be a 50 or 60 person or larger firm. But the 25 to 30 person firm, I think, allows us to really be part of communities, to really be a big part of communities and understand how best to make those types of places and excellent architecture within those communities for the people of the communities in a very personal, very uh, sort of grassroots, way, as opposed to doing a lot of traveling. We'd rather spend our time. I would rather spend my time, being in communication and collaborating with the people in these communities.
So I found myself jotting down some notes. I think it might be the first time in this series of interviews that I've done with different people that I jotted down notes, not because they didn't have interesting things to say, but I think it was the way that you said it that I decided to take these notes. It was just an impulse. It was just instinctive. And let me tell you what happened. As you were describing your philosophy, there were three words or versions of words that emerged that you said: inspire, enrich, and invite. That's what the build, right? That's what these projects do within communities. And simultaneously, it dawned on me that these projects become members of the community. And members of a community inspire each other. They enrich each other's lives, and they invite or welcome others who are in that community. So you're creating new members or a welcome member in that community. I just I have it written down now. I will keep that. It's profound.
I like how you stated and summarized that, because I think that's pretty accurate.
Well, that's what I heard. So I really appreciate that. So again, we're doing this conversation virtually, or at least through uh, uh, this Zoom technology. Part of the award that you're receiving is it has this requirement, or at least this component, to come back and to engage with students. Certainly we just talked about your volunteer work as a form of engagement, but to engage with students. And so, you're here on campus, you can do that in the classroom, but through through this technology, we can have virtual engagements. I know that you've had an experience with engaging students through virtual means. Can you share that story with us? Would you mind?
That's a great story. We had a intern last summer from Penn State, who I first met in the architecture mentorship program. She was a fourth year student. Mm-hmm. And we mentored, virtually and even in person before everything broke loose. And when she asked me about, well, should she stay local, if she could get a summer internship or go out of town and find something, I said, yeah, go out of town, find something and get that experience, outside your comfort zone. And she did that. She lined up an internship. I don't know exactly where, but then the pandemic hit and it fell through. And I was her mentor. So she said, "Oh, it fell through." And I said, "Well, that really sucks." And she said, "I'm not sure what I'm going to do now." And I said, "Well, let me think about this." I said, "Maybe we can work out a virtual internship." I mean, this is maybe March, April, of 2020, I guess. And I'm working at home as well during that time period, and I sat down with a yellow tablet, and I thought, I wondered if we could, if I had enough sort of different types of experiences involving, virtual participation, if it's Zoom meetings, which we were just starting to do then, with clients, or internal design discussions, the occasional site visit to a construction site was still permitted. Or if there was a small project or something that she could sort of work on from a design perspective or visualization perspective, as sort of her project, and then other kind of miscellaneous things. And I quickly looked at this, realized that I thought we could craft and I could kind of curate a internship, with all these different buckets and experiences for her. And we did that. I said, well, this is what I think I can do. I'm going to sort of curate a 9-week internship, and it'll be virtual, and we'll organize it, what meetings you're in and what project you work on. This is all in contrast to, say, the typical internship where, yeah, you're in the studio 5 days a week, and you're probably working with a person or small group on a project or two. So it was this more varied set of experiences, albeit virtual, with different people, different groups. It turned out to be fantastic. She, in her words, she absolutely loved it. Tremendous experience. We actually did it for a second intern as well. And then as I guess it was in this fall, she went back, to school virtually, graduates in a couple of weeks, but she approached me. She couched it by, she said, my colleagues are asking me about how and when they should look for a job, and how they should do this, and what should they keep in mind. And so I said, well, yeah, and she said, I might want to ask you about my own situation. I said, sure. So we set up a safely distanced conversation. I think that might have been in January of 2021. Mm-hmm. And, basically it came around to, she said, I don't know if you're hiring, but I would really like to work for you. And I had kind of made, I was intentionally not going down that path. I didn't want to compromise any kind of mentorship, relationship. Right. But I said, well, if we do this, then you don't have to go to career day or whatever, sort of jokingly. But it's probably, one of only 1 or 2 times that I hired somebody right on the spot. And so we worked it out. She's a very talented, very impressive young woman. She's going to join us in about 2.5 weeks or so.
That's fantastic.
And that's how it all worked out. And I've had other people ask me about the virtual internship, and I've spoken to them, people at other firms. And I spoke a little bit to the board, the Arts and Architecture Board. And I think there's something very, very, really rich with potential that is possible in terms of virtual internships. I mean, having gone through that process, and even without the outcome that occurred in our case, and hearing the 2 interns we had reflect on it, I mean, they were extraordinarily positive about their internship experience. And I know some people at other owners of other firms have said, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to have an intern, with the pandemic. And I've really tried to encourage, firms to think about it a little differently.
Well, I'm just extremely impressed with how you were able to just tackle that. I mean, again, that's a matter of tackling a problem that's in front of us, right? But how powerful is that experience that it essentially, aside from you have this new employee joining you in a couple of weeks, that internship was so powerful, had all of the components that it needed, including, I'm just projecting here because I don't know the student that you worked with, some degree of confidence to be able to have a conversation with classmates about professional goals and applying for jobs, confidence to approach you yet again, she worked the internship with you, and then confidence to actually have the conversation with you about employment. I mean, there's something about the indirect outcomes that are built into really, really powerful experiences. I'm really impressed. And because we had to shift an entire college essentially during spring break from in residence to virtual, you essentially turned an in-residence internship into virtual in a very short period of time as well. I know how much work it takes to do that. And so really just deeply impressed with that. And it's a fantastic story. So, okay, so let's think about it this way. We're still at Penn State. Let's go back to let's say the 1980s. You're a student. Think about your 18 to 22-year-old self. So you're going through those 10-week sessions, and I'm sure you've received quite a bit of advice uh, before going to college. You know, professors give you advice in classes, or other folks give you advice. Um, After everything that you've done, this volunteer work, the work with communities, the various projects you've worked on, the internship, if you could talk to your 18 or to 21-year-old self, your undergraduate self, go back and talk to Frank when he was in at Penn State, what advice would you have for him?
And I didn't get a lot of specific advice, before I came to Penn State, before going to college. I mean, not a, my parents, uncles, aunts, none of them, went to college. It was the sons and daughters who were the first, generations in both sides of my family. So, and I don't think I encountered an architect until I came home. I think might have been the summer of my sophomore year to get my wisdom teeth out. And I was in the surgeon's room lying down. I remember them bringing an architect through, and so I didn't have a lot of advice, but what I think I would try, and this is difficult, particularly not just for the student, but maybe parents, but the advice I would try to impart would be to not get so focused on the grades or too focused on, on the part of the process in architecture school, that is can bring a lot of stress. I'd be trying to give advice like, don't worry so much about it. It's your education. These are your projects. Dive in and explore and learn, and do the best you can, but learn, and investigate, and decide, what it is or what aspects really resonate, and don't worry. And I did pretty well, grade wise, but, in reflecting, I'd be trying to push that to the side or put it in a little better perspective. Do well, learn, research. In fact, the young woman who was my mentor and had the internship, wanted me to just sort of talk with me a few times about her thesis, which I agreed to do. But I sort of started, and then two or three, email conversations and one actual conversation, I would always sort of bring up one, I thought, critical point. I said, don't get too bogged down with reality. This is your thesis. And I said, it's your thesis, maybe the only thesis you get to do. It's not your professor's thesis. It's not my thesis. Be sure it's your thesis. And that's a version of maybe, what the advice I would give to the 18 or 22-year-old person is, it's tough because this is all new, but it's like, this is your opportunity to really learn and take your own path, and don't, listen to what other people say, but don't take it literally. Maybe, I mean, maybe that's counter to, what professors want to hear or parents want to hear, but I think it's critical, to have a little bit of that perspective.
Yeah, a bit of what I hear people refer to as healthy skepticism. Right, you take it in, and you hold it, but you also allow yourself open to have it modified, to add new experiences and new thoughts. So, would 18-year-old Frank have listened to that advice?
I'd like to think he would, because it was so much was happening so quickly, in the scenarios there, and it was inspiring. I think I would. It's okay. I'll give it a try. I mean, the first months arriving at Penn State, and your classroom is the top floor of the engineering units, which this is not your classroom from high school. I mean, it was pretty, it was not a inspiring environment for your first months on campus. Now, by the time I left 4 years later, it was the area and the spaces I loved. We could personalize, we could make our own, but the first couple months were challenging, and I think there were some individuals, some other students, and kind of said, "Hang in there," this guy is just forget about what he says. He's not that bad of a professor, or whatever. It's difficult to take that advice, when you are only 18 or 19 years old, and you're coming from a small town, that has 700 people living in it, in York County. Things are different now, I think.
Yeah.
But I think there's still something to kind of process it the way you described. There's something positive about that.
Absolutely. So we've talked quite a bit about your experiences through your career, your volunteer work. What is something exciting that you're working on? Not to suggest that things that you work on aren't exciting, but what is particularly motivating or exciting to you at this point that you're working on?
And honestly, it is all exciting, but there's maybe two efforts I'll mention that are I think extraordinarily exciting to me and our firm. One is under construction in Harrisburg. It's a project, and it's at the Capitol Complex in Harrisburg, and it's the Forum Building, which was built in 1932, and a couple years ago we restored and renovated the auditorium in the Forum Building, which is an Art Deco tour de force. It is one of the most magnificent room spaces I've ever seen, and we had the privilege of restoring and renovating that. In fact, the Penn State, what's it called, the President's Concert was out there.
That's right.
The College of Arts and Art, and so that we're now doing the rest of the building, the rest of the 400,000 square feet, which involves preservation, preservation and conservation of artwork and craftsmanship in a number of areas, but also and repairs, but also repurposing what is hard to believe, close to 400,000 square feet of space that was empty, state-owned space into state-of-the-art, safe workplace environments that are sustainable and daylit. And the new occupant, ironically, is going to be the Department of Education, which was the original occupant in 1932. So it's an incredible, it just started construction. It's an incredible project. We worked on the design for 2 to 3 years. And so that's one I can't ignore, and it's at our state capitol. But the other one that I'm really passionate about, and I'm passionate about all of them, but the one that we just started design work on is much smaller, is in the city of York. It's for a nonprofit, Crispus Attucks, which is you're probably familiar with, but is celebrating their 90th anniversary as an organization in York. And I got a call from the executive director, who said, "Frank, I want you to design a building for me." I said, "Oh, new building?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's great." I said, "I'll do a really, really good job for it. It'll be a really great building." He said, "Well, that's why I'm calling you." And what we're designing, we just finished the schematic design, is a new building, kind of on the edge of their parking lot of their campus in York, and it's a history museum, Crispus Attucks History Museum, and York City African American Community Museum. And so we've had initial conversations, and as was presented, we have boxes and boxes of things, and we just don't want them to be down in the basement. And so I am personally, and people in my firm, we are just absolutely thrilled to be in such a collaboration and in such a situation where we're going to be doing a hell of a lot of listening and learning and storytelling, in this new building, which, I already made comments like it's not going to be a stagnant, museum. It's going to be about experiences. It's going to be about the stories of the community, if it's music or art, prominent families, and the history of Crispus Attucks. And so we're really letting what it is evolve and come to us. Even though we have some initial concepts that are pretty exciting about what the building means and could represent. So I am very thrilled about both of those projects for kind of opposite spectrums.
Yeah, no, they're both very exciting and with interesting histories and interesting stories to them. But the Crispus Attucks example, I'm so glad I wrote this down. I'm going to go back. I'm going to say these three words because I heard these three words as you're talking. That project will inspire, enrich, and invite.
Absolutely.
Wow. Look, Frank, this has been a great conversation with you. I have a set of, I mean, we could continue for hours and hours, I'm sure, because the ways in which you're talking about your role in community, with communities through architecture, your volunteer work, the work with students, it's fantastic. To have you as part of our Penn State community and part of the College of Arts and Architecture is just, I can say thank you and mean it genuinely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To have you as part of who we are is so rewarding.
Well, thank you. I mean, it truly is a privilege, and it truly is a pleasure. I know that's a cliche, but it truly is.
Well, listen. Speaking of cliches, I want to do one more set of questions here, and it goes to you as a Penn Stater and your connection to Penn State. So. I have a series of few questions I want to ask you, just real quick questions, and give me a quick answer if possible. All right, here we are. We're at the Penn State Creamery, Frank. What's your favorite flavor?
Was peachy paterno because I like peach ice cream, but in recent years it's called Happy Happy Joy Joy, the almond joy. That's my current favorite.
Okay, that works. Where did you live when you were on campus?
I lived in North Hall's Beam Hall, which was the Arts and Architecture Interest House on the first few floors.
Okay, you remember the location too, within the building. I'm saying.
North Hall, yeah.
Nice. Who is a person of influence for you when you were here at Penn State? You've been an influence to so many people in these stories. Who was influential to you?
Well, I think a couple of the professors were very influential. I mean, and again, great conversations with people like Roy Volmer in particular. I think I had second year, and again, I really learned, I think, how to think. And so the assignments were, like, well, design a temple for a child. Well, what is a temple for a child? So I think the professors, Lou and Sarah, Roy Volmer, Julian Weiss, those were really the influential people.
Great. So we've talked about people, we've talked about places. Can you think of a defining moment or an experience from your days at Penn State?
Graduation? No. I think it was, I don't think there's one particular experience. I think the way they're all connected, at Penn State, it's sort of this continuum, for 4 years that it's almost one experience. That the more comfortable you get, the more you learn. I think it just becomes more meaningful. I think I'd say at the end of our 4 years, there was a class trip to New York City with, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us. And it just seemed to be like the right kind of exclamation point. Actually, we went to Philly and then to New York City. And I won't tell you the details of it, but that seemed to be maybe the right explanation point to our 4 years.
Nice. All right, final quick question here. We've talked about, you mentioned that the top floor, your freshman year, working that studio space, seems like that was an important spot to work, but was it your favorite spot on campus? Where was your favorite spot on campus?
I think that became my favorite spot. Some of the outdoor, landscape places were my maybe favorite spots. It was the Hub Lawn, Old Main Lawn, the mall. Those I think I always loved walking through them, being in them. But probably one of my other favorite spots was off campus for many of us. The Penn State Diner was sort of just across College Avenue from the engineering units. And that became a very meaningful place, and a favorite place. And I know it's not really there anymore, but,
Right.
It was sort of part of the whole experience and community. And so that I would mention as a favorite place.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I know that's a favorite place for many people during their time here. Frank, this has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I am so looking forward to congratulating you in person in the fall when we presumably can get together and acknowledge and recognize your award, and also looking forward to you in your role as president of the Alumni Society. So thank you, Frank, for your time today and for your commitment to the college and just the wonderful, wonderful work that you do. This has been great to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you, Dean Carpenter. I've enjoyed very much talking to you, and I'm looking forward to those same moments and events coming up in person.
Absolutely.